initiative under the Forge Change name, an organization focused on educating and empowering school board members and parents to drive meaningful change reform in our educational system. The goal of this training is to equip both new and experienced board members, as well as parents, with the knowledge and strategies necessary to navigate the complexities of school governance and effectively. School Board Warrior Training is our first effort to help organize, support, and strengthen each other in this important work. Before I begin, I wanted to read a brief legal disclaimer. Forge Change provides a platform for discussion and education on critical issues, but it does not necessarily endorse or agree with the views expressed by speakers or attendees. The opinions shared during this event are those of individuals and do not reflect the official position of Forge Change. Additionally, Forge Change is not responsible for any statements made by participants. Please note that this training is being recorded, but only the speakers will be recorded, and it is your choice to announce your name and your school district if you choose to do so. The bathrooms are located right around this wall or down the hall if those two are busy. Breakfast, muffins, and coffee are available in the back, and lunch will be served around noon. And I will be circulating a few thank you cards, and I'd appreciate if you take a few minutes and sign your name, because we do have somebody who sponsored this room and the food and a couple other things. So we also would appreciate your valuable feedback. So when I send you an email asking you for your feedback, if you don't mind responding to me, I really appreciate it. And now it is my pleasure to announce our first speaker. What? Oh, okay, sorry. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So everybody please stand. Thank you, Dave, for that reminder. Wasn't in my notes. All right, the flag is right here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now to kick us off, we have a veteran with us. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Benjamin Herring. He's the president of Citizen Advisory in Pennsylvania, a nonprofit dedicated to advocating the rights of children and stakeholders in Northeastern Pennsylvania. The organization promotes transparency in fiscal policy and curriculum decisions while holding local officials accountable. As president, Mr. Herring leads initiatives to protect constitutional freedoms and empower parents through information sharing efforts. Citizens Advisory oversees compliance across Pennsylvania 500 school districts to ensure responsible governance. A certified project manager with over 15 years of experience managing large-scale projects, including those valued up to $2 billion. He transitioned to a nonprofit in 2021, and after recognizing the lack of oversight and declining academic standards within public school systems. He's a U.S. Marine combat that deployed twice to support Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. His commendations include the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal and Combat V, the Combat Action Ribbon Gold Star, and a multiple unit and campaign awards. Please give a round of applause for Ben. And it's on. And there you go. Grab my water bottle. Okay, you can move that mic up.
Very nice. Let me make sure that I'm square away first. Did you put your finger on?
Oh, no. Here, wear this so we can hear you on the camera as well.
Sounds good. Put that mic on there. Yep. Can you hear me now? All right, so good morning all.
Thank you, Rayanne, for that excellent introduction. I appreciate that. And Dave and Rayanne, thank you very much for putting this together. It's nice to see everybody today on this beautiful rainy day. As Rayanne said, I come from Northeast Pennsylvania. Anybody ever heard of Luzerne or Lackawanna counties? That's where I'm from. I'm from I currently live in Duryea, which is by Pittston. If you've really heard of Northeast PA, you might know where Pittston is, but if not, you probably have no clue what I'm talking about. But Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is not the hometown of Joseph Biden, is also pretty close to me. But I just want to make sure that disclaimer is out there. Scranton does not recognize Mr. Biden as having grown up there. So that's that. But again, I really appreciate, we have a lot of meetings, Citizens Advisory of Pennsylvania. We have a lot of meetings. We've done a lot of outreach. Maria Alt is here from Southern Lehigh. I've actually been down to her school districts just once, but it was enough the one time. But it's nice to see some familiar faces here. I see Janet as well. Nice to see you this morning. But we have a lot of meetings, and I really want to give some kudos to Rayanne. I mean, Rayanne reached out. She put all this together, her and Dave, of course. But I'm really impressed with the formality. I'm really impressed with the way you have this laid out, and even just looking through kind of those information sheets in front of you all. I think they're very well done. So kudos to you guys. You did an excellent job. A lot of people, and I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole kicking this whole thing off, but a lot of people will go on social media. A lot of people will say, we need to stand up, we need to do this, we need to do that. But a lot of people don't actually put the physical work into doing it. So once again, Rayanne, thank you, and Dave, you guys did an excellent job here. So yeah, Citizens Advisory of Pennsylvania. I'm the president now. Our former president was Jamie Walsh, who's now a state representative. So Jamie and I started this organization in 2021 during the COVID lockdown / masking of our children. I do have a full-time job. This is something I do on a volunteer basis, but it's something I do with the same kind of spirit and ferocity that I did when I was in the Marine Corps, because our children are not experiments. Our children should not have been masked for as long as they were. And school board members that allow that, which I'll get into, I'm not picking on school board members. We need to make sure that they're educated so a COVID-19 situation never happens again. So that's why I joined this realm, this world of nonprofit advocacy, not because I have all the time on my hands that I wanted to do this, but, like we say in the Marine Corps, if you don't like something, get promoted and fix it. In this case, it was, if you don't like something, get active and fix it, and that's what I did. So getting into what I'm here to talk about today, this is near and dear to my heart. I have a daughter. How do I word this? I've worded this so many different ways, but if you're a father sitting here today and you have a daughter, that's the number one job we have in this world, is to protect our children, especially if it's a female child, known as a girl, for those who may be confused. But I don't think anybody in this room is confused. And when my daughter was born, I mean, that changed my whole trajectory of what my priorities and my values were. So for me to take time on the weekends or the weekdays or whatever is nothing compared to me not being there for my child. So my daughter is the most important thing to me in the world. And I wish more fathers, just right off the bat, would stand up. I hear a lot of moms, and I give you a lot of credit, because it's usually the moms out there screaming at people. Yeah. Don't mess with a mom. I get that. But fathers as well need to be, and let me look in the camera, a lot more active. Time to stand up if you're a dad out there and you have a daughter. So this is our number one priority. We have 8 priority sets at Citizens Advisory of Pennsylvania. I do have business cards if you guys want to check out our website or ever be involved in the future, kind of see what we're doing. We have some really cool initiatives that are going on now, to include the Do No Harm Act, which is at the, what's that? I will, yeah. The Do No Harm Act, if you guys heard about that, it's at the Senate right now, and it talks about making sure kids don't get mutilely castrated. I think a lot of people don't realize that Medicare is actually paying for a lot of the trans surgeries that are going on. So
that would be a big savings.
Be a huge savings. It's about 25 million nationwide right now. And that's only the ones that are coded the correct way. But it's bad. We'll have plenty of time today to talk about all that good stuff. But I think kind of where I'm going with this is, we have priorities and we act on those priorities, but Title IX is our number one priority. When we saw the last administration really attack females and try and let this transgenderism insanity take over our schools, we knew that that was something we had to fight head on. So that is our number one priority. If there's ever situations within the school districts in Pennsylvania that have to do with that, please reach out to us, because that's where we put the majority of our resources to fight back on. And I'm also going to talk about the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. Anybody ever heard of that? PHRC? You're going to get a good education today. I say good, it might not be good. They're not good people. So we'll start from the beginning. Title IX / PHRC, what I'll kind of boil this down to is going to be discrimination policies within schools. So you got to break it down into two parts. You have your federal protections and you have your state protections. This used to not be an issue. This actually used to not even be talked about, but it's insane. When this was happening in the previous administration, the only thing that a lot of school boards would say, Title IX says we have to allow a boy into the girls' sports. And that was the end of the conversation. And shame on school boards that did that. Now that the roles got reversed, now all of a sudden, well, there's the federal protections, but there's also the state protections. So now, only federal law doesn't just apply anymore. Now there's federal and state. So if you have a very progressive school board, they're now fighting back on constituents and citizens and saying, well, we have to follow the PHRC. But remember, 4 years in a row, nobody cared about the PHRC. All they cared about was the federal level. So I'm going to break down both for you so you can be educated on how to kind of call them to the carpet when they try and run that on you. But let's talk federal protection first. 1979, Title IX. Does anybody know kind of the crux of Title IX, what it was created for?
Yeah.
Exactly. Equal representation, equal, having sports. If there was a men's basketball team, the girls said, why can't we have a basketball team? That's Title IX in a nutshell. That's really what it is. If you're going to give public funding, taxpayer funding to the boys basketball team, you should also give it to the girls basketball team. That's the whole premise of Title IX. So when Title IX was created, again, 1979, back in the day, back in the 70s, think of the world being different in the 70s than it is today, right? A lot different. But, people understood there needs to be an equal playing field. Title IX was never really changed. It was never really touched whatsoever until Barack Obama was president. When Barack Obama was president, he was the first one that actually tried to change the language of Title IX to include transgender. For the purposes of today's, all-day event here, when I say transgender, you guys obviously understand that means a boy that thinks he's a girl or a girl that thinks he's a boy. Just to put that out there so we're clear. So when you're allowed to have a gender identity or gender fluidity, as some folks use, you're now allowing somebody to kind of pick and choose. If I wake up on Monday, female today. Tuesday, I feel a little bit more masculine. I think I'm a male. It's a very slippery slope. It's dangerous. So Barack Obama introduced that, and it had to go through the rulemaking process, the administrative regulation process that happens at the federal level. And a very important point here, too, is that if Congress wanted to change Title IX, Congress holds the sole authority to do so. This is not an executive order change that should be made. All the presidents are doing it. I understand why they're doing it. They're trying to advance their policies. However, Title IX was enacted by Congress. Title IX can be changed by Congress, but you're not seeing that happen. That's a shame on Congress, if you ask me. But I want to talk about what's currently there. So I put a little date timestamp on the left. I give props to President Donald J. Trump on his very first day in office. He made a declaration. It is the policy of the United States to recognize two sexes, male and female. It's unfortunate that he had to do that. This is wild, isn't it, when you think of that? You really have to put that in paper, But he had to. These sexes are not changeable and are grounded in fundamental and incontrovertible reality. I agree wholeheartedly with that. You cannot just change your sex. I want to be a millionaire. Can I go to the bank and say I identify as a millionaire today? They're probably going to laugh at me. The same should be considered with transgenderism. Now, to be, a little empathetic here, if there's a child that's growing up and for some reason they're watching the wrong thing on social media and they say, maybe I'm really a girl, we should get them help. We shouldn't just discard these people and say, go live a different life somewhere else. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there's a way to approach that without just telling them, oh, okay, you're a girl. You're a girl. It's not the way to do it. The second thing, this is huge. This is really big. And forgive me, I'm going to try not to go too far into the rabbit holes here because, again, I'm very passionate about this stuff. The prior administration argued that the Supreme Court's decision in Bostock v. Clayton, and you'll hear that a lot if you ever deal with this topic, this is a court decision that's brought up constantly. Now, in this court decision, they reference Title VII. Anybody ever heard of Title VII before? Title VII is employment. So this case went all the way through because, and I don't know the specifics that much on this individual plaintiff, but I'm pretty sure it was a gay man that was fired because he was gay. So he took this case to court, went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they ruled you can't fire somebody simply because they're gay. Okay, I personally don't have an issue with that. But what they did was they conflated that decision and said, see that? If you're gay, meaning sexual orientation, or transgender, you now have protections. I have constantly screamed about this because Clayton v. Bostock had nothing to do with Title IX. Nothing. Zero. You will not find one reference to Title IX in that decision. But what the Department of Education did after that decision came out is they publicly put out advisements to school boards across the nation. Department of Education across the nation said, from now on, you have to pass your policy 103 or your non-discrimination policy to include gender identity and sexual orientation. They did a rocket blast, very vague, and said, now you all must do that. That was incorrect. That was absolutely not what should have been done. But we all know there's a lot of activism in the bureaucracy of the federal government. And when this decision came out, they thought it was a great opportunity for them to now include gender identity. I think it's been wrong all along. I think the Supreme Court is going to fix this, but in the meantime, we have to call these things out when we see them. But that's what the prior administration used is a foundational piece to pass all of this new Title IX stuff. I say pass, it's not pass. Put an executive order out there. So even here, there's some Boyertown folks in the room. Even Boyertown has been used, I think, nefariously to try and push it on the state level, which I'll talk about that a little bit too. But Clayton v. Bostock is the federal level case that they use. You guys, I mean, you've heard they use landmark cases, sometimes that language landmark. This is what the transgender community folks and the activists, they try and use this as their landmark case to rewrite the rules. So. Are we giving copies of this to anybody that wants one, or?
I can email it.
If you want a copy of this, by all means. Nothing here is proprietary or.
Yeah, it's the wrong person. Yes, okay.
Now here's something that's cool. So on January 31st, 11 days after that initial memo came out, and the memo that I just showed you there, that was a memorandum from President Donald J. Trump instructing all agencies, to change the language back to pre-Joe Biden. So that was a memorandum saying, fix it fast. Usually you get 90 days to fix it. But again, federal level, everybody kind of knows now. If you're a school board member and you're sitting there and you know you have federal funding coming your way, you're on notice that you must change your policies back to be consistent with the president's order. Otherwise, you risk losing funding. So that was clear. That was on day one of his presidency. So everybody should be good on that, right? Well, on January 31st, yeah.
That policy is 103.
For your local school boards, if you use the PSBA, that's 103, yes. Any version of 103. So you have 103.1, 103.2. Just check them out. The ones that sometimes they have 103.1, which is for teachers only. 103 is usually for the students. Either one of them. It covers all people within the school. So they can't say like, oh, teachers, you have to share a restroom, but the children don't have to. Like it covers everybody. Okay. So here's something that's really cool too. So in 2020, Donald Trump's administration, before leaving, got the Title IX rules to pass. And this is kind of tricky so follow along, please. It's going to get a little tricky here. It takes years to pass an administrative change on a regulation when you do not use Congress. That's kind of my point before. Congress should be the ones doing this. So when there's an executive order that says, I want the Department of Education to change Title IX, it has to go through a pretty rigorous process, right? It could take up to 2 to 3 years. We saw that with the previous administration because they tried to change it and then it took a long time. The reason it takes a long time is because you as the public get to comment on that change. So public commenting periods are required through the rulemaking process. So if I say I want to change Rule 1 tomorrow, I have to propose my rule. I have to give deadlines that starting on June 1st and ending on November 1st, all the public gets to comment on my change. And then after that, the agency responsible for the change has to adjudicate those comments. And you're going to see that in a future slide, so that's kind of important to understand. So what happened was when Biden tried to change Title IX, there was a massive amount of public comments. Kudos, thank the Lord, kudos to all the parents that did that. Because what that does, it's actually a good strategy. If you don't like the rulemaking change that's being proposed and you flood them with comments, you just delayed that thing a year. And that's exactly what happened. So, is that me? Am I too close?
You're good.
Filibuster? I like that. So in 2020, Donald Trump finally got his proposed Title IX changes through. Remember, he was inaugurated January 20th, 2017. It took 3 years. So he wanted the Obama era changes, which included transgenderism, to be removed. He proposed it in 2017. In 2020, it went into effect, legally into effect, right? So those 2020 regulations were what we all knew. And if you were living in 2020 under COVID, and I know, Maria, you're one of them, or 2021, or even 2022, and your policy 103 had gender identity under your protections for discrimination, believe it or not, you were wrong the whole time. You were always wrong, but you were threatened by the mafia saying that if you don't protect the transgender children, you're going to be in trouble. But that was fear mongering. It wasn't a legal argument. It wasn't a legal statement. Title IX from 2020 is the only thing that was actually valid, believe it or not, up until recently. I'll get into that. So the Biden administration, as we all know, January 20th, 2020, what was that, 2021? Yeah, 2021. They proposed, so it's kind of like this roller coaster, right? Obama, transgender, Trump, removed it. Biden put it right back in. So he put that in. Again, tons of public comments. It was awesome. And then finally went through the legal system. There were plenty of organizations such as Moms for Liberty. Give them a lot of credit because they're the ones that actually got the injunction. They sued to say this is not legal. There's no such thing as this. You can just pick and choose Monday and Tuesday what sex you are. So that was struck down at the very end of Biden's administration. So again, that goes back to my comment before. The 2020 regulations of Title IX were the only legal regulations that we've had for the last 5 years. The Biden regulation was never enacted. It was put out there. You would have thought it was enacted with all the fear-mongering, but it was never a true legal requirement.
So are you saying that gender identity should not be listed as a protected discrimination in any school policy?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Wow.
There's no protect. I'm going to get into it. I'm talking federal level. I'm going to tell you why at the state level I agree with the same thing. Now, little caveat though, I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to be an attorney. I'm just somebody that's studied this pretty extensively. Now, the attorney that's going to talk today, Attorney Chad Schnee, is actually our attorney as well. We love Chad. We work with him all the time. So maybe if he's willing, wants to indulge in that, he can maybe give a legal opinion on that. Yeah. So you can hear it from a lawyer. I don't want to put him on the spot, but maybe he can answer that. But I would say, and if I was sitting on a school board, if I was speaking in front of a school board or advising a school board, their regulation, if you look at the plain text of the law, was never valid.
So in our case, they use the lawyer.
Yeah, so they're trying to use the state level. No, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. That was federal. Yeah, that was Third Circuit. Yeah, that was Third Circuit.
Yeah, they use that to say.
Yeah, that was also incorrect. Yep. And I'll talk about that. I won't just say that's wrong and move on.
Oh.
Yeah. So no, that's a really good point.
Whoever wants to use it, we'll pass that around.
Okay.
It looks cartoonish.
Yeah, there's a lot. Trust me, we're gonna have a lot of questions on this. But again, just kind of, I told you it's gonna get tricky, but just kind of listen to what I'm saying. 2020, Trump Title IX was in effect. They pushed for the new regulation. It was held up in court. Even though the Department of Education was putting out guidance telling you Clayton v. Bostock was the underlying rule, none of that ever made it through the rulemaking process. You can't just change a rule from Monday to Tuesday. It has to follow the administrative regulatory process. That never was fully done. The Title IX final rule, if you go and you Google Title IX final rule under Joe Biden, it never made it. It died on the vine. They pushed it, and right before they pushed it is when you saw the Moms for Liberty injunction come out. There was also and I have it on here, you guys can look it up, Tennessee versus the U.S. Department of Education. There was an injunction also given separate from the Moms for Liberty case that was given to 26 states because those attorney generals got together. So there was a lot of litigation out there. But again, the crux and the kind of the point I'm getting to here is because of lawsuits, because of public comments, because of the administrative process, if you over the last 4 years had your policy 103 saying gender identity, there is a legal argument against that. You can absolutely make a legal argument against that. Okay, and here's kind of the argument from the other side. I want to give perspective here, right? So open Title IX investigations initiated under the 2024 Title IX rule, 2024 would have been the Biden rule, should be immediately reoriented to comport fully with the requirements of the 2020 Title IX rule. That was from President Trump. So what he directed the Department of Education to do is any investigation opened during the Biden Title IX period was to be reoriented to fall within the new Title IX Donald Trump regulations. So basically, if you filed a complaint, said, my son thinks he's a girl and he's being discriminated against, that complaint is probably going to get thrown away because those complaints fall under the previous administration. Does that make sense so far? Now, at the federal level, there is the Office of Civil Rights, Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. Now, I call balls and strikes, so I'm going to call bad things as I see them, no matter who the party is, who the people are, I don't care. The Office of Civil Rights is currently being downsized, which I'm not really happy about, because I think there's going to be some fallout from that. I fully support this DOGE effort to reduce the bureaucracy and all the bloat we have in our government, but actually reducing the number of OCR agents that are out there, I think is a bad call, because I think it's about to be weaponized, and I'll explain that too. But the Office of Civil Rights personnel are the ones that investigate complaints, right? So we had one that I'm going to speak a little about at the local level that I was aware of. So if Maria, I'll pick on you, Maria submits a civil rights complaint against her school district and says, my child was forced to play on the same sport as a boy, right? So once that complaint is lodged, the OCR will get involved. So they're going to be the investigator. They're going to come out to your school. If you guys followed Central Bucks, remember? Yeah. They got put in the news all the time. They were trying to... Okay, there you go. So you know full well what they did with that. Quaker, there you go. I think it's going to get weaponized much more than you're seeing today. But the OCR personnel will come out. They'll start to ask questions. It's just like you would see in a normal kind of lawsuit, if you will. The school can settle, if you will, if you want to call it that, by signing maybe a consent decree or something that says we will now do this. So Maria goes through the process. The school gets notified that a parent submitted an OCR complaint. They say, okay, we'll change our 103 policy. That could be enough to satisfy the complaint, and the complaint could be thrown away. They could say, no way, we have to follow the PHRC guidance. We're not dismissing this complaint, and that goes to the whole investigation. These investigations can take years. It's just like this administrative process. It could take a long time. But I have a little note here. The vast majority of OCR Title IX investigations are resolved with the voluntary agreement between all parties, just like I said before. It's usually a settlement that occurs when this goes through. So, I mean, they're the oversight. I just wanted you guys to know that. They're the oversight. They're the people you would be dealing with if you had a complaint. And Conversely, as we move into 2025 and 26, you might see their names used in the media as kind of a weapon, right? These new Title IX regulations under Donald Trump are protecting our daughters. However, the other side is probably going to submit all kinds of Title IX complaints and say, no, my boy should be allowed to go in with your daughter, right? So, and you'll see that, and I think Central Bucks was a pretty good indicator of what they're trying to do. They're now going to say, oh, they're under investigation. Look, Central Bucks is such bad people. That board is horrible. They're under investigation. It means nothing. They're under investigation because you can file frivolous complaints, and until they're fully adjudicated, people are like, oh, they're under investigation. Okay, everybody in this room could be under investigation tomorrow. I can go call the cops on the way out and say, everybody harassed me. Does that mean you're bad people? No, it means I'm using it as a weapon, as a tool, right? So just keep that in mind. So that's the federal level. Before I get into the state, are there any questions on Title IX at the federal level? And Rayanne, am I okay with taking questions now versus the later Q&A? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wanted to catch the camera, right? Yeah.
No, I don't need you on the camera. No. I want your voice to be heard. So,
Do you guys all have that cool Philly accent? Because I don't have that. I know Rayanne has it. I don't have that cool accent.
Okay. Okay, so as a grandparent, I've been told I'm not allowed to like tour the school. I have to request all the right to knows and things like that. And then they take forever to get back to me. And then Grandma, I forget. And I don't get in the timing to get back to them within, like the 72 hours or something like that. What can I do to find out if our school is investigated? Like, I want to know the steps of how to do that. A lot of parents that I talk to don't know how to do all this extra stuff. So where would we get the resources to say, step one, you approach the school board on a school board meeting night, ask them for the information, and then what's our next step? Because they don't have a conversation with you.
Yeah, they don't have to answer questions. So I'm not going to steal Attorney Schnee's thunder. He's definitely going to talk right to know today. That's a great question, though. Anything under OCR investigation is not for public consumption. It is confidential. So right. And of course, if you do the right to know request, I'm sure you guys have played the same games I've played. They're going to say it's under investigation. Use one of those exemptions. They don't have to provide you any information. And in this case, they're actually accurate. They don't have to. So you won't find out about an OCR investigation until it's closed or a settlement is made. But that's,
You might not find out then either.
You might not find out then either. If there's a settlement and they have a confidentiality agreement in that settlement, you'll never find out about it. That's not necessarily a bad thing, though. No news is good news sometimes. They want to pick on our kids, and OCR dismisses those complaints. I'm okay with that. Yes, sir.
board member that knows we're under investigation, ask their constituents, what do you think about this? We're under investigation.
Yeah, so you as the what do they call that?
Public official.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to think, like, in the context of an investigation, you're basically the aggrieved party because you're under investigation. I don't think there's anything that says you can't talk about it. It's everybody else that can't talk about it, but I don't think the aggrieved party has that same
We
role.
will help you.
Yeah, if they throw these, insane complaints against you as a weapon, I'm pretty sure you have the right to talk about it. So, great question, though. But I do think Attorney Schnee can definitely expound on that. I think that'd be good.
They cost a lot of money, so it's like our parents we can't afford a lawyer, so it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get this information.
If you go to YouTube, shameless plug here. If you go to YouTube, shameless plug for me. I'm about to plug my organization. We real quick, hold on, sir. We have podcasts that we did with our executive director, and we have one on the right to know process. I would definitely watch that if you can. But it's Citizens Advisory of Pennsylvania on YouTube. You'll find us. You'll see the logo. But we did, I think, 26 or so podcasts. Check the episodes out. They're all titled. But I talk pretty extensively. I won't tie it up here, but about the right to know process. If you can, let me just say this. If you can tie your request to money, your chances of success are greatly increased. So don't talk about the subject matter. Tie it to money, because they have a hard time hiding behind that one. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Why are we using the term transgender instead of what it really is? Transsexual or transvestite?
Transvestite, yep.
Didn't anybody watch Rocky Horror Picture Show?
Absolutely. Listen, you're hitting near and dear to my heart. If I remember, I'm representing an organization, so I'm going to speak as correct as I can because we've done a lot of good work. But when you start to use those terms, which are probably legally accurate, all you're doing is fueling the fire for the nut jobs to come out and attack you even more. If they want to call it transgender, I don't care what you call it. You can call it Mickey Mouse. You can call it Donald Duck. To me, the context is still the same. There's no such thing, in my opinion. God created man and woman, and that's it. But again, transgender, anything trans, right? Trans-millionaire, trans-billionaire. We can go all day with this. The word games are ridiculous. I fully agree with you on that. The word games are nonsense. And when you start coalescing or you start cowtailing to these names and 75 genders, it creates a big, big issue. Huge issue. So I respect what you just said. Transgender, I'm okay with that. But you're right, transvestite, I think was used for many, many, many years. Now they try and say that that's a hurtful word. I don't care what a hurtful word is.
Grow thick skin.
Grow thick skin. If it's reality, it's reality. The sky's blue, right? You don't get to change the color of the sky. Yes, Janet, go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Janet Dooner from Monroe County, Pleasant Valley School District. And our school district, I don't know if this is a statement or more of a question, but watching within our school district how they had a Title IX coordinator or investigator being given that job title. It was the athletic director, and they turned it into an administrative position that they had to be under the Act 93. I might be saying the wrong act, but they had to. So I guess this, again, I don't know if this is a question or just a statement to be aware of these things in school districts. What is that actual position engaged in the school district, constantly looking for Title IX violations themselves or creating the violations?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, so if you take this all the way, let's go to a very macro level. If I'm a Title IX coordinator, the first two slides I showed, which is federal Title IX is in the language of the job title, right? That means every single thing that's in black and white that is current law is what I am to enforce, is what I am to advise my school board directors on, and to ensure the policies are consistent with that. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm not doing my job. Maria? That is a pretty neat microphone. Where'd you get that? That thing. It's like from NASA.
So our acting superintendent is in charge of the right to know request. We did previously, like back in 2020, 2021, had a right to know coordinator for Southern Lehigh. And now, which I didn't think could be, but the acting superintendent is that yeah. Allowed? And then also I just did a right to know request, and our solicitor, King Spry, is answering my right to know request, and they are definitely against us. Like our solicitor Jessica is like on the Pennsylvania gender thing, whatever, so she's like not for us. So how is it that the our solicitor is company like King Spry is involved?
Yeah, that's one of those, it's not right, but is it the hill you want to die on kind of things, right? Yeah. It's like really, it's dumb. So a solicitor should really only be involved in a right to know request if they use the exemption that it has to go under legal review. Your right to know officer should really adjudicate that at that level. It shouldn't have to go to the solicitor. But do they do it all the time and get away with it? Yes, they do. They do it all the time and get away with it. But truly, that should be under legal review as an exemption before your solicitor is truly getting involved there. But I can tell you that at least half the schools in this state don't follow that. They all like to throw their lawyer because they get scared. They get scared of parents like you that have knowledge and they know what they're doing. And they're like, oh, crap, can I answer this? Or might I get myself in trouble? To your first question, can a right to know officer be anybody on the staff? They can be. It can be other duties as assigned. Is it the right thing to do? Again, no. But tell you what, if they say, oh, we're going to cut our budget and we're going to get rid of the right to know officer and assign it to the superintendent, I would probably be okay with that because you're going to reduce the financial burden. So, yes, sir.
Content with that.
God bless you.
I
So what happened, Central Bucks, is that they had this grooming of the teachers, especially the girls. And so there was a lot of, we had conservative school board, and Luca Bauer was very good at top school district in the state. And they got all these girls, all this stuff with transgender things. So I got up and said, well, about the rape of the girl in Virginia. And then they yelled and screamed, oh, I'm anti-gay or what happened, and came in the papers. But then I studied it, and I came back with, I'm not anti-gay or anti-transgender. I'm against abuse of the transgenders, like Billboard Chris, with this pushing for the multi-billion-dollar transgender medical industry, which is involved with all the 300 doctors around there saying they're for this.
$1 million per patient.
Yeah, $1 million per patient with those surgeries, and it's never-ending pay. Because it doesn't work.
I'll address this now, and then I'll go to the state level because I don't want to forget my thoughts. Thank you. That was really good comments. No, you're right. Words matter, and the way we kind of like attack this matters. I use kind of a quote from, you ever want to read a really good book? It's called Parents of the World Unite, or Parents of the Nation Unite. It was written by, what's his name? Loudoun County. Ian Pryor out of Loudoun County. And Loudoun County parents had this fight on their hands pre-2020 or right around 2020, and they sued, and they actually beat Loudoun County School District pretty bad in court. The superintendent got fired. If you guys saw that on national news, the one father's daughter got raped in the bathroom. Horrible situation, right? But in that, he talks about a really good strategic concept, which is land, air, and sea, and it's near and dear to my heart as a veteran. So land warfare, if you will, or kind of fighting back on this whole word language, or really all that, is going door to door and educating your fellow citizens, educating your neighbors. It's called the ground game, and I'm fully on board the ground game. That's why you hopefully, unless I do something really wrong, you won't see my face on the news screaming at a school board meeting. Because I think ground game is the most effective way to do it. So you educate your neighbors. The air game, that's where you go in front of public meetings. And it's not always a good thing because, as you've learned, the crazies out there, they like to hijack those spots, right? Yeah. That's the air game. So they're always going to call you every name under the sun. You're probably racist, you're a bigot, you're homophobe, you're everything, right? Yeah. And language matters because, and I'll just leave you with this, if you look up queer theory, which I highly recommend looking up, you'll be disgusted, so don't eat before that. But queer theory is intrinsically tied to transgender, the pushing of this transgender stuff. And if you actually read about queer theory, it was a guy who thought age was just a number and I should be allowed to sleep with an 11-year-old girl if I want to, because our social construct talks about age, but truly, does age really matter? That's the founder of queer theory. So words matter, and you have to be educated to fight back. Because if you want to throw out LGBTQ, Q equals queer. So if you want that as part of your logo that you're wearing on your chest, you might want to read what it stands for. Because queer theory is not what I would be tied to if you start talking about pedophiles. You know what I mean? So I'll get more on that too. I'll talk more.
They say hit land and air. What was the lesson?
What's that?
Hit land.
Oh, land, air, and sea. C, thank you. Excellent. Thanks, Dave. C is your covert operations. It's my favorite one. So that's when I start going to meetings with people that I don't agree with, and I just start taking all their knowledge back and kind of formulating a game plan because I'm on the inside. That's your James O'Keefe kind of stuff. OMG media. That's C warfare.
Thank you. I'm Ann, and I'm from the Council Rock School Board. I'm on the board.
Okay.
I'm questioning on 103. So when you look at a policy, just so for education, when you look at a policy, and it was done in August of 2022, and it talks about sex, gender, sexual orientation, and it has all the little attachments for the rules underneath it, the guidelines. Is that what you go to see if it's current and following those current laws?
Are you talking about what the references are there?
Yeah.
All the laws and everything? Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Absolutely. They should be accurate.
They should be accurate and updated to current.
Yes.
Okay.
if your solicitor reviews your policies, which they should, and they're looking over the reference language where that's their legal backing, your legal backing, to create that policy. So if it's not accurate, a judge will see that in court, and they'll ask you why you did not update your references to talk about the current law. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, and all of those references should be updated even though it's a change.
Yeah, but you know what the trick is there, right? You ever see how they put their PS or PCS, Pennsylvania Constitution, and then they just throw in the header information? So they're keeping it vague on purpose a lot of times, because anytime that changes underneath, that top level doesn't change, so they always just go to that. But the legal argument that could be made on that is within that language, no matter what subcategory I'm talking about, once that's updated, a law gets passed, that's what I should be following.
But the PSBA is the one that's doing the updates for most of the schools because we're all members of it.
Yes.
Boyertown is, and they update ours. So how do we know?
Later too.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Are you going to talk about that? Excellent. Good. All right. Great questions, though. That's why we have the experts in the room. I'm happy about that. All right. Let's see where we're at here.
The short answer for that one, by the way, is the PSBA is a third-party lobbyist organization. It is not a government organization.
Yes.
So just,
They-
I mean,
Yep.
because basically when you have his clip, you want to make sure you can pass it to the next thing, but still kind of answer it a little bit.
Yeah. 501c4s are political organizations. We're a 501c3, which means we're nonpartisan. We're going to call balls and strikes. But PSBA is a 501c4, meaning they can be partisan, and they absolutely are. I would recommend you sever ties with them immediately, and you go to the Pennsylvania School Directors Coalition, PSDC.
Perfect. And if you want evidence as to why, just pull up their 990 form
Yeah.
and see what they're doing.
Yeah, Pennsylvania School Directors Coalition, PSDC. That's going to be an up-and-coming thing. The woman running it, her name is Christina Brusalis. She's also a school board member. She's awesome. And they're already doing training. They already have an attorney on staff. So they're going to be equivalent to the PSBA very soon.
Are they good?
They're really good.
Okay. What's the
Pennsylvania School Directors Coalition, PSDC. They're probably on Facebook. I have contact with Christina that I can provide for anybody that wants it. She's excellent. She's doing a really good job. They're out of Western Pennsylvania. They're out of Pittsburgh. So, all right. 51 minutes in already. I better hurry up on this one. All right. I'm going to cover this a little bit quicker. And then if you guys have questions, I'll be here for most of the day, if not all day. So you guys can ask me anything. Yeah. All right. So we talked about federal protections. So again, if your policies refer to the federal level, like 103 talks about a Title IX investigator and all this stuff, you should be consistent with everything I just talked about. What we're seeing now with this kind of lawfare type strategy by the very progressive folks out there, to include school board members, is they're now pivoting to say, well, we have to follow the state laws. So if you've followed lately, Maine was sued by the Trump administration because they flat out said, we're not going to follow Title IX, right? But if you look deeper into that whole situation, their state level commission said gender identity was a protected class. This is going to happen in Pennsylvania. So what's happening in Maine will happen here. Mark my words. Because our Attorney General, thank God, is Dave Sunday, so I don't think he's going to play that game. But Josh Shapiro will. He'll tell President Trump, no, we have our own state protections, so we're going to follow those. And it's going to fall out the same way Maine did, I'm telling you. But what governs us in the state? Let me talk about that. So we have what's called the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, PHRA. There's also the Pennsylvania Fair Educational Opportunities Act, PFEOA. Okay, not so much PFEOA for this forum, because that's your secondary education, that's your colleges for the most part. But I want you to focus on PHRA. So this covers discrimination in employment, housing, commercial property, education, which is highlighted there, and public accommodations. PHRA has been amended many times since its adoption in 1955. So let's go back, right? Title IX was in the 70s. Much different world we live in. 1955, you could argue, was like night and day from where we're at now. People actually worked hard back then. But the 1955 regulation PHRA was meant for almost the spirit of Title IX to a T, the same thing. Let's not, discriminate against people because of their sex. Let's treat ladies the same way we treat the men. Let's not treat people that are black or a different race worse than us. It had the same spirit as Title IX. A kind of a note here to really, if you're an investigator, if you're somebody that really loves knowledge and loves digging into things, dig into this. The Pennsylvania Crown Act, which talked about hair type and all that stuff, hair texture. This is way outside of my ballpark. It passed the State House 194-8, and I threw that in there for a reason. So when they amend the PHRA, they just admitted they do it through legislative action, right? That's important again. Remember, Title IX, Congress can change that. They've chosen not to. Same thing at the state level. Congress can change the PHRA if they want to. They haven't, except for this Crown Act. They did that. They thought it was a good idea to push that forward, right? Crown Act, hair stuff, good. Transgender boys and girls bathrooms, no good. Makes no sense to me. So these elected officials need to get their heads out of their rear ends. But anyways, so the PHRA governs it as the law. Who enforces that is the PHRC, Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. Again, if you're a studying person, go look up Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. Don't eat first, because you're going to want to throw up on that one too. This guy is as wild and radical as you'll see. So he is the kind of the person in charge of any complaints that'll be lodged through the PHRC. It's not a good situation. But what is the PHRC comprised of? 11 commissioners appointed by the governor and confirmed by the state senate. So advise and consent, that's good. I like that. They act as public liaisons, establish policies. So they establish the policies and resolve some cases that are not settled voluntarily. I think that's, is that cut off? Yeah, it's cut off a little bit. Okay, I'll just talk to it. The commission is independent, try not to laugh here. The commission is independent and nonpartisan, with no more than 6 commissioners from one political party. The chairperson is appointed by the governor. The vice chair, secretary, and assistant secretary are elected by commissioners each year. So they're going to make you believe this PHRC is 100% nonpartisan. I can tell you that's not the case. Maybe if you're using their language, it is the case, but these 11 commissioners are usually rubber stamps. Now let's talk. Is there a way to change that, Dave, by chance? Because this is a pretty important slide. Is there a way I can, it's like cut off. It's probably my fault for doing Adobe, right? Instead of PowerPoint. Is there a way to move that down a little bit? Yeah, like the page breaks, they're not.
Yeah.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, I can do that from now on then. Just move it down, right? Yeah, that's good. All right, so let's talk about PHRC enforcement actions from 2023 to 2024. I wanted you guys to see the data behind this, not just me up here running my mouth. PHRC adopted in 2022 gender identity as a protected class, right? So you would think with all of the fighting that goes on, you see all over the news and everything with this subject, that there would be a litany of complaints lodged. But believe it or not, if you look here, I have it in red, that number is 0. Number is 0. There's over 500 school districts. Not one complaint was lodged under the PHRC for education, for any gender identity. So if there's that many people out there that identify, and this is just a widespread issue and we're attacking transgender people, not one complaint in a whole year period, not one. Not one. I mean, that's pretty insane, not one. So they, if you look at the pie chart there, that giant orange covering right there, that's employment issues. So that means somebody submitted a complaint saying I'm discriminated against because of my race, gender, sex, not gender, race, sex, age, disability, Those are the ones that go to the PHRC, and they investigated 84% of their complaints were on employment, only employment. Housing, 156 complaints. Public accommodation and commercial property, 109 complaints. And education, holistically, total, was 59. When you take that education number and you break it down into sex discrimination, because remember, it could be, education is just a category, but it could be any of the protected classes. When you look at sex altogether, there were 20 total gender identity / transgender complaints lodged, 18 in employment, 1 in housing, 1 in public accommodations, and 0 in education. So again, the data doesn't support that this is a kind of an attack on transgender people. That's really what I wanted to show you guys there.
You're saying no transgender people made complaints to the PHRC?
Not one. Not one person in the last 12 months.
That's all Pennsylvania.
That's all of Pennsylvania. Yep, not one. All right, so here's the bad news on the PHRC. This is where they went wild and they got caught. And I'm going to talk about on my last slide what we're doing to combat what they're doing, or what they've done, I should say. All right, so on October 18, 2022, the PHRC submitted a final rule change proposal to the IRCC. The IRCC is the Independent Regulatory Review Commission. If you go back to what I said at the beginning, every rule change that's not done by Congress, which is a law change, anything we want to change administratively has to go through a process that takes a long time. It can take 2 to 3 years, just like Title IX. It's the same thing at the state level. So they submitted their change to the IRCC October 18th, 2022. Their reasoning for the change that I highlighted here, the PHRC recognizes that certain terms are not defined in the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. Given the lack of clarity as to the interpretation of the PHRA and the because certain terms are not explained, the PHRC recognizes a compelling public interest in clarifying their meaning. What did they think wasn't clear? The word sex. They thought the word sex should include sexual orientation, gender expression, gender identity, and the 1,700 other gender words that are in there. So they submitted a final rule change to make those all part of the word sex, right? And you see it up here. That's the commission when they received it. I have about 120 pages on this, so I have a lot of information I'd be happy to share with you guys. Part of their justification for submitting this rule change, all persons not already covered by the PHRA will be affected by the proposed regulations. However, the effect will be minimal if not positive. So they told the rulemaking authority that by changing sex to include gender identity, it not only would be minimal, it would be positive. So our daughters should be happy about this rule change, is what they're saying. Because this is going to make everybody happier. Boys should be allowed to play sports against girls. Commission went on to say here, if nothing would violate their free exercise of religion, they could file a claim under the Religious Freedom Protection Act if they felt so compelled. Meaning if your school district said, let me explain that. If your school district said, PHRC is the Bible, we have to follow this. So our 103 policy will say gender identity. Then you have a student that comes to you and says, well, you know, I'm a devout Catholic and I don't believe in this. I believe in man, you know, God made man and woman, and I want to have my own facilities to use without sharing them with somebody else. Then that person would then have to go file another complaint using the Religious Freedom Protection Act, RFRA. So again, now you have these two different things that are confusing each other. PHRC, gender identity is a thing, but if it's against your religion, you file over here, right? So now you're like playing this whack-a-mole game. It's ridiculous. It was a horrible excuse for them to put that in there, but I just wanted you to see what they said. So the PHRC had to do the public comment period. Again, if you go back to what I was saying before, this has to go through the entire process. There were 77 comments. It started on April 9th, 2022, and it concluded on May 10th, 2022. I wish there was a lot more than 77, but at least there were 77 comments that went in there. And the PHRC, once again, kind of bastardizing the system, they're saying they sought input from everyone. Well, clearly not if 77 people responded. And they had 3 sessions in person: Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Harrisburg. That was their excuse for really reaching out to everybody. We all know what those cities look like. Okay, I don't think that was reaching out to everybody. All right, so here's some good news. So that just to clear this up, that policy went into effect. That rule change did go into effect. So if you look at the PHRC right now, it says sex is defined as gender identity, gender expression, gender whatever, gender whatever, gender whatever. So if the PHRC gets notified by school district A that you're not allowing a boy into a girl's bathroom, the PHRC can say, we're going to investigate you. Okay, so you got Title IX telling you don't do it, I'm going to take all your funding away, which they will. Then at the state level, they're saying, don't do it, you're not allowed to. All right, so you got conflicting state and state and federal guidance, right? So the Pennsylvania Department of Education, PDE, of course, again, I'm putting on my Nostradamus hat again. They're going to make some school district an example. They're going to try and make it a big media thing and say, look, Central Bucks West changed their 103 policy. Now we're going after them. And they're going to put it all over the news, right? But again, just like Maine is dealing with, it's going to play out in court. And it kind of already is to a degree. So I want to talk about this. Anybody here know Beth Ann Rosica? She writes for Broad and Liberty. She's awesome. She's great. So you know her? Yeah, she's excellent. If you don't know her, get to know her. She's amazing. She's got a PhD. She's a genius. She's also a fighter. She's a mom. But she got the firm of Dillon, McCandless, King, Coulter, and Graham, located in Western Pennsylvania, and they're special counsel to the Thomas More Society. They filed a petition on March 6th of this year. So they did file a lawsuit finally because everything I just told you about the PHRC is conflicting. It's against federal law, but it's also against common sense, if you ask me. So they filed this petition on behalf of 2 school districts: Southside Areas School District, located in Beaver County. I want to say that's Notch School District, located in Butler County. State Representative Aaron Bernstein, who serves portions of Butler and Lawrence counties. State Representative Barb Gleim, serving parts of Cumberland County. Jason Saylor, Perk Valley School Board Director. This guy's a rock star. He not only says it, but he does it. He voted all the time to protect the girls. Located in Montgomery County. Alexandra Pasternak in Delaware County, and then Beth Ann Rosica. So this lawsuit is going forward. I have very high hopes of this lawsuit. I think it's clear as day that going back to the very beginning, I'm going to wrap this all up together. If you want this to be changed, if you have an appetite to change your policies, your laws to allow for transgenderism to run wild, the legislature is the way to do it. Your state reps need to pass a law. They need to change the PHRA. If you're at the federal level, your congressmen or women need to change Title IX. But unless they do that at the legislative level, we're going to have these fights all the time through executive orders, through administrative rule changes, so on and so forth. So I think this is going to die on the vine. I think I give so much credit and salute these folks here that filed this lawsuit, because I think they have a great chance of winning. And that's going to take the PHRC change of regulations, and that's going to throw it away. So they're going to go back to sex, meaning man and woman, the way it should be. And I'm going to, last slide. So not horrible, Ryan. I'm only 7 minutes over. 3 minutes, all right. I'm good, I'm sorry. School board directors within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Let me say this as clear as I can. I respect all of you for being here today. I think school board directors over the last 5 years have really let us down. I can't run for a partisan office because of my job, or else I would, but because I'm not just going to sit up here and spew it, I'll put my money where my mouth is. But you need to understand you have the authority to enact policies consistent with your values, vision, and morality. You do. Anybody that tells you otherwise, any lawyer that tells you otherwise is lying to you. Here's why. Number 2, the courts will not interfere with your decisions. This has been played out in courts many, many times. The one I come to There was a recent one, is Prozan versus Mill Creek, which Attorney Schnee actually litigated. He could talk about this. That's why I kept this in here. When the masking went on during COVID-19, there were parents that sued their school board and said, you can't mask our children. This went to many different courts all across the state. You know what the courts always said? We are not a super school board. School boards are local entities. They make the rules. So what does that mean for us in this room? Okay, you want to set the rules, we'll play by them. So if you have morality when it comes to this transgender stuff, boys and girls and all that stuff, you make your policies the way you see fit. Okay, your solicitor can give you advice, but that doesn't mean you have to follow it. Make your policies the way you see fit. That should go to every school board director out there. 103 policies should include all the protections, but gender identity should not be one of them. I wrote on here, it's, good old Marine Corps 101, honor, courage, commitment. That's something we live by, but it's also something I think we need here. You have to have honor. If you're putting your name on the line, you're running for school board, keep your honor, keep your dignity, protect our daughters first and foremost. You have to have courage because they're going to come after you. They're going to show up at your school board meetings. They're going to start screaming and yelling and acting like fools. That's fine. Keep your honor. And you have to be committed to this cause. You can't be okay this year, but the more pressure that comes on you, you say, you know what? I quit. I'm out. You can't do it. You got to have all three. This is something that we got to, our children are watching. We got to make sure we do the right thing by them. So again, I'll be here. Sorry so long-winded. Rayanne, thank you for the extra 10 minutes. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.